I think this one is going to be a good one. I'm really interested about the retail industry. Last time we spent a lot of time focused on the manufacturing side, and this one, I keep saying it every time we do the analysis of each industry, and I look at them, I kind of each time get more excited because I learn more things about the industries themselves, which is great. So yeah, excited to share this one. And the feedback, by the way, that we had from the manufacturing one was really interesting because we had a lot of customers, a lot of folks in market, especially in the US. There seems to be a lot of bringing back onto the US shores.
Yeah,
And there seems to be a lot of folks looking at how to really drive the manufacturing. So it's been really, really helpful feedback.
yeah, and it was. I saw a little bit of that as well. The competing commercial tensions of finding the most efficient way to deliver, but then also securing up your supply chain, and that this also applies to retail. The supply chain is key for retail as well. It doesn't get as much focus in the stats that we'll run through today, but that was a really interesting discussion point out of the manufacturing.
Yeah. The other thing that's been really fascinating is to hear each region. So in the Asia Pacific region, how things are being treated very differently in North America versus in the UK and Europe. So I'm spending a lot of time talking with customers all over the world at the moment, and we're all collectively solving the same problems, but there's some localization and nuances dependent on political, economic environments as well. So
Yeah.
such an incredible topic. But I think we should get started. I think we should get started. So welcome everyone to the Reejig Skills Masterclass. This is where we unbundle one industry at a time with our work ontology. Today's session is all about the retail industry, one of the most vital sectors in the world. Probably where I spend most of my time as a mother is in the shops. I'm Siobhan Savage. I'm the CEO of Reejig, and I'm also joined by Mike Reed. Mike is our Chief Product Officer and is also responsible for our work ontology. We're here to simplify the complexities of each industry as we're all starting to think about this new world. How do we use data to help unlock workforce potential? How do we help you understand what is happening within your workforce? There is a lot of conversation right now about what are the AI impacts? How do I think about AI implementation? What does that mean when it comes to our people? What does that mean when it comes to reskilling? And we're here to help you dive into that topic today. And we want you to build a very bold and very responsible workforce. Before we begin, though, let's just cover off the agenda and what we're going to go through. So first, we'll begin by looking at the actual retail industry itself. We're going to explore sort of what CEOs and leaders are prioritizing. It's really important that all of our workforce strategies are directly connected to what your leaders care about, or they will be disconnected from the actual reality and what you'll get budget for. We're going to discuss how to build a bold and responsible workforce. We'll take a look at practical workforce strategies to help you reinvent your workforce. We're going to dive into some examples that'll help you understand the work ontology itself for this industry and how you can think about AI and how to ensure that you leave no one behind with your reskilling strategy. Mike will take off sort of the cover of the data and dig really deep into sort of what the stories are telling us, what the data is telling, and then what strategies that you can take from there. And hopefully you gain a lot of insights from this, because we've been getting some really great feedback from customers who are, sitting trying to figure out what this new world looks like and how to think about the industry impacts when it comes to AI, when it comes to workforce intelligence, and when it comes to your people. So there has never been a more exciting time for our space and for us to be HR leaders. So as an industry itself, let's talk about the retail industry. So the global retail industry was valued at around 26 trillion in 2023. It employs over 10% of the global workforce. So that is an incredible amount of folks that are working within retail. That is a lot of the economy is being centered that if 10% of the global workforce is in retail, that is incredible. As a very big industry. The projected growth when it comes to this sector is 30 trillion by 2027. For the US alone, retail jobs account for 16 million jobs in their local economies through brick and mortar type businesses. Retail is the backbone of consumer spending. About 60% of global GDP and e-commerce, the fastest growing segment, represents 22% of all retail sales, which grew globally by 10% in 2023. So I just want to take a moment to stop on that data because that is huge. Not only is that huge, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say that the last point you made about the like the rapid growth of e-commerce and even hybrid. That's what's been over the recent period, the recent 5 years, really transforming it, because that drives us to an online service model, and it drives us to really this accelerated time to deliver as well. So the whole logistics chain is changing in order to get things from warehouse, not through brick and mortar, but into somebody's hand. So the whole of the infrastructure surrounding retail has changed.
And, you know, from a workforce perspective, something also really important to think about, this is a deskless workforce. So predominantly you will find that this workforce is deskless, and the complexities around managing this workforce are completely different than a lot of the language that you hear. And a lot of the advice and a lot of industry reports are really not around the deskless worker. They're typically within, you know, a desk environment. You know, data around these folks would be very limited because obviously they're not on LinkedIn, they're not available in areas for us to actually deeply understand them. So I'm really excited to go through this data because I know how hard it was for us to pull this data and how expensive it was, given this data cohort doesn't typically exist in your publicly available data sources. So that, I mean, that's incredible, the scale of that size of workforce. I didn't even realize that until sort of we went through these numbers, that the 10% population is actually in that workforce type. One of the things we at Reejig love to do is we love to analyze your calls. So we love to look at what your analysts are saying when your CEOs and your leaders and your CFOs do your board reports and your quarterly reviews where they present to the markets. They are fascinating calls. Anyone on the call here, if you are not spending time actually listening to the earnings calls of your organization or your industry, you're missing out. If you don't want to do what I do and actually physically listen to them, then you can actually take them, download them, transcribe them into GPT or whatever your, you know, large language model of choice would be, and ask for key messages, because it is incredible to understand from a data perspective what is happening. And this is one of the things that we really push, you know, the people leaders to think about is your workforce strategies need to be directly aligned to what the CEOs are caring about right now, because what they're talking about at those earnings calls is actually the strategy within the next few years. And it is very important for you to listen out and have your ear to the ground on that so that you understand what is coming up. You know, you can see from a retail perspective that there are key priorities when it comes to cost control, automation, digital transformation, AI integration, customer experience. You've seen the CEO of Nordstrom is focusing on talent retention combined with utilizing AI to ease labor shortages. So given there is such a, you know, hot market for folks in retail, and I've got a second question in my brain that's wondering, like, look, why is it? Are they going to other avenues, other industries? Have folks left retail because of COVID? And we're now starting to see more shortages. You're seeing the CEO of Target is prioritizing supply chain efficiency through automation and AI. So they don't want to sacrifice on customer experience, or they want to increase velocity to customers. So using AI to think about velocity and customer experience, and supply chain, which is directly linked to bottom line. Like, you don't want to have a whole pile of products sitting in a factory if you can actually automate and manage your supply chain effectively. And then obviously Andy, who's CEO of Amazon, the leader in pretty much a lot of the online retail, is pushing limits with automation and AI, but wants its integration to be beneficial to the human experience, which is really interesting because Amazon's reputation, typically when it comes to their automation and digital factories, you know, has a little bit of a reputation when it's more about velocity and getting the packages out. So, you know, it'll be really interesting to see how they can not replace the human and curate that empathy. But as you can see, it's the topics that we're seeing across every industry. Everyone cares about cost right now. Everyone is trying to figure out where to use automation. And we're not just talking generative AI people. We are talking about robotics, RPA, physical robots. For anyone who is following the Tesla bots, this is the world that you're starting to see, where folks are starting to look at factories and retail and think about how they can use automation, whether it's for direct to consumer in your retail environment or whether it's in the back end in the supply chain. AI integration and digital transformation is the hottest thing that's happening when it comes to increasing customer experience. You'll also see, a lot of talk about labor shortages and talent retention. So we analyze pretty much every major earnings call across the sector, and these are kind of the word clouds that we're coming out. So I don't think I'm not surprised by any of these. Are you, Mike?
The one that I think I was reflecting on was the themes around the customer's experience, the infrastructure, the acceleration of delivery, the optimization of routing, the online, the hybrid experience, all of that kind of stuff feels like it's going to be the new normal. It is the new normal effectively for retail. But in 2 out of 3 in 66% of the calls, customer experience, maintaining empathy, that's going to be the differentiator. It's how do we make our brand stand out? That's not because we get it to you yesterday. It's because of the experience that the individual's having. And that is so strongly linked in the data, so strongly linked to increases in revenue.
Do you remember whenever the main retailers brought in the self-service checkouts? And how everyone got really cranky by them? And it was really interesting. 2 things happened. Everyone got really cranky, and then their theft went up. So they created this new problem where they not only reduced consumer experience, but also everybody was stealing. And there was this new problem that probably no one thought about when it came to actually bringing in robotics or bringing in some form of automation. So there's a lot of things that come along when you start to think about AI. Like, the AI potential of your workforce is one thing, but where is the net new task curation? Well, the net new task curation in that world is we now need to have scanners to see what your AI, scanning your products that are on your actual counter, so that you're not stealing and putting a mango in as a grape. And it sounds ridiculous, but when you think about that at a workforce level, that's the type of stuff that's actually happened. And it's been really fascinating to see that when you start to automate, you create these completely new tasks, which eventually will create either new automations and new workers or new jobs. And when you're looking at these level of problems, right? So we're talking automation, we're talking about a new workforce DNA, we're talking about speeding up velocity, we're talking about retention of talent. This is not something that we can just do the same that we've been doing over and over again. This requires a complete reinvention of your workforce. And I think we're very excited at Reejig. My expertise is in workforce optimization. So I do think how do we make sure that our organization is really busy and that we're creating zero waste in our business? But with the potential, especially in key sectors like retail and manufacturing, for automation and AI potential, it is very important that we are having a bold and responsible workforce strategy. So we want organizations to be really bold and absolutely think about new ways of working, their new workforce DNA, which will include robotics, generative AI. But we also want to make sure that where they're having these net impacts to the tasks that are being done within the workforce, that will ultimately have an impact into your people. And we want to make sure that you as leaders are not just thinking about being bold and harvesting people out of work and putting in robots. What we want you to think about is, how can I create this really bold workforce strategy that enables you to have fixed and flex workers with our digital workers, while at the same time as making sure that you are being really responsible and you are either pivoting folks into meaningful work, or you're finding ways to free folks up to do the most valuable part of their job and give them the best career possible, to make sure that you're retaining them. So when you're going about this approach, your job is to be alongside the CEO and the leadership team to talk about being really bold and really responsible. There is a lot of pressure now within sectors for everyone to be really bold, but we do not want to forget the really responsible component of that as well. When we're thinking about sort of what is bold and responsible, your dream state as a workforce strategist, as a leader, as anyone who's thinking about adopting a bold and responsible workforce strategy, one, you want to reinvent your workforce. So thinking about, how do we look at all of the work that's being done within your workforce? What are all the tasks and skills? Where is AI impacting? Where is their workforce bloat? Because we've got an incredible amount of task duplication. How do we think about moving work to worker? So we're not talking about people in jobs and giving them jobs. We're talking about organizations have all of the work to be done. What is the best worker to complete this work? And how do I create a world where orchestration of work is happening within your business seamlessly, which is not only good for your business, but it's also really good for your people because it creates this culture of opportunity. And then finally, how do we think about retaining your top people and making sure that you are reskilling? You as an organization need to train yourself into becoming a reskilling powerhouse. Over the next 2 to 5 years, we are going to see changes like we have never seen before when it comes to work. And you need to get ready. We need to prepare for becoming those powerhouses that are enabling our businesses to constantly always on reskill our people into meaningful work. Now, one of the key things that sort of I've learned in my journey, I'm a workforce strategist by background, and this sounds really simple, but actually it's probably been the most lightning bolt moment for me in my journey in terms of building out technology that solves this problem. Jobs have tasks, jobs do not have skills. We keep talking about people have skills and jobs have skills. That is not true. Jobs have tasks. AI automates tasks. You need skills to complete tasks. And then people have skills. So when you are thinking about this, your people have skills, your work has tasks, and you require the skills to complete that. So you need to understand the data at a deeper level to ensure that you are making good and fair decisions when it comes to your workforce strategy. Now, the Reejig work ontology itself. So when we're thinking about our work ontology, the way that we think about work is we look at every single job, we break it down into tasks. We break it down into the skills required to complete those tasks. We can tell you the AI potential then of each one of those tasks. So what's really important is, you've seen the CEOs, Andy and others, my friends at the start telling us that velocity was important, workforce bloat, AI potential. When you're thinking about this in your workforce, you want to look at what are all the tasks being done within our business? Where is actually the skills required to do those tasks, which gives you a really high quality value of skill. And the depth and breadth of skill is really important because you don't want to just have like random skills associated with the job title, because typically that's not very good data, as we found that out ourselves over our years of sort of iterating in the space. And then what you want to be able to see is the AI potential, the efficiencies, the velocity, where the workforce bloat is. If you think about bringing in AI, how long until you see the ROI and the realization of that spend, and what is the type of money that you would expect to see that you would save from adopting AI. So this is data that we have in Reejig. We've over 23 different industry ontologies. So we have this data on every single industry, hence why we're giving these sessions, because we want to make sure that everyone has access to that data too, and that you can use it to make really good decisions in your workforce. The data that we're really interested in talking about with you today is AI Potential Index. So what has the highest potential for AI or automation? The workforce bloat, so task duplication. A lot of folks are working on the same things and no one knows because no one knows. So how do we make sure that we can identify where that bloat is and where that task duplication is? And when you think about it from an employee, you are going to free them up to do the most valuable part of their job. But on a business side, you're going to make sure that you are also creating a really zero waste business where the business is super happy and optimized. The ROI timeline, and then we're going to talk about the reskilling. So a lot of the bold and responsible work that I spend my time on is, okay, if you're thinking about automation, how do we make sure that everyone has access to meaningful work? What does that look like? Mike, I would love for you to take some time to really walk us through what have you learned in terms of the retail industry itself, and really break it down for us in terms of that data set that we've actually pulled together. What were the key insights that you've learned?
Yep, for sure. Looking forward to running through this one as well. Like I said, everyone that we've done, from technology to health to manufacturing to retail, I think brought a completely different lens to the challenges for both the industry and the workforce. Looking at the snapshot today, again, there's a whole range of different sectors within retail that all operate quite differently. But when we look overall, about half of the workforce globally is frontline, is interfacing directly with the consumer, with the purchaser. And I'm sure you can imagine, and you've seen, you kind of touched on it already in some supermarket examples where removing the checkout, the cashier, the register has a whole lot of knock-on effects. So that front line is already in the middle of a huge transition. And that transition is to hybrid and e-commerce, online shopping. So those sectors of the retail workforce are also significantly shifting, significantly growing at around between 8 and 10% year on year as more and more retailers are transitioning to these new models of doing business. So your logistics and your supply chain are now dealing with how do I get the product that you just purchased from our warehouse straight to your hands in the hour or in the day or this week without having to go through a shelf and stock taken in a store. And behind that is clearly all of the infrastructure that's supporting around 11% at the moment, but growing very, very quickly. And this transition is really just continuing the move towards this omni-channel and this e-commerce focus. Can't look at everything. We've only got an hour. So what I've done here again is to just jump in and find some of those roles which are critical to the beating heart of the retail industry, and looked at those which are most open to like a bold transition. So this is what would a company look at in order to revolutionize the way they're delivering their outcomes through their workforce, and what are some of those big steps that can have a really dramatic impact on how they're delivering on it. And the ones that I jumped into here, supply chain and inventory, this one does come up quite frequently, but I'll touch on it with respect to the retail industry. Customer service, so that is what traditionally is frontline for retail, but it's now the service that supports online, the service that supports hybrid, both in a digital form, but also in that hybrid space. What's changing in bricks and mortar for frontline staff? Mm-hmm. And then looking at those analysts that are around the pricing and merchandising, the things that are really going to shift the levers on where a consumer spends their time and their money. Jumping into the supply chain and inventory, there is huge opportunity to accelerate the timeline from, as we were saying with manufacturing last week, from raw materials to product in the hand of the consumer. From the retail perspective, it's taking it from the manufacturer and getting it into the consumer's hands as quickly as possible. What AI allows us to accelerate and optimize is all of those parts of the logistics chain, the supply chain. It's the warehousing, the backlog of stock, getting it optimum routing depending on time of day and channel of routing the actual goods themselves, getting it into the hands of the consumer as quickly as possible, and removing those real pain points for an organization where they're having a stock out and there's nothing available. They're now having dissatisfied customers who aren't getting their one, or overstock where they've got assets that they've invested in sitting on the shelves, not being delivered, not turning into revenue. So both of those real pain points for the traditional retail model are being addressed significantly by AI models in inventory management and logistics, to the degree of in the order of 30 to 40% efficiency gain. And these flow straight through, the improvement in that efficiency flows straight through the bottom line savings. So if there's capital investment sitting on the shelf, that reduces your profitability. So the ability to increase that flows straight through to the ROI and margin. A number of the changes that we're seeing, sorry, just going to touch on the workforce size there. A number of the changes we're seeing across a number of areas are really putting roles at risk, as increased efficiency means I don't need a team of 100 now, I can do that with a team of one. But in these kind of spaces, we see that there's a real growth required in logistics management and AI technicians in order to support this. So the huge improvements in efficiencies come with a reshape of the workforce. And these tools are reasonably quick to implement, staying away from those large asset investments in robotic warehouses, looking at the toolkit that helps to improve routing, improve delivery. There's a reasonably straightforward implementation. Jumping to retail and customer service, again, focusing here, I guess, on what might be considered the low-hanging fruit, those parts of the retail industry that are already shifting online. They're already highly digital. The opportunities there is having transitioned from a frontline staff who are in store to customer service who are digitally accessible. the opportunity now is to make them more effective. So it really is about helping them to respond quickly to customer service and respond effectively with information that's going to help them make a better decision, a better buying decision. So the obvious candidates here are the ones that are most mature in this market, the AI, the chatbots that are really supporting that customer service and customer support to some extent, but focusing on surfacing. Those can significantly improve the ability of the individual to deliver on that experience. So while 70 to 80% of routine inquiries can get handled by the AI potentially in some of these markets, the role of the individual in the workforce now is to step in at that escalation point, or to make sure that those models are being trained on data that's helping the models to respond accurately. So it really is finding a workforce now that is able to operate at that higher level of escalation with customer interaction so that they're able to deliver on the experience, maybe in a different way, but also to make sure that they're supporting the growth and development of these AI models so that they are uniquely describing the value of the retail. And again, when we look at what I've called the low-hanging fruit, those much more mature technologies around the chatbots and the AI support infrastructure and the customer support infrastructure, they are reasonably quick to implement. So 6 to 9 months is what we've seen in market. And the final one that I've grabbed for a review on the retail is some of the existing analyst roles, so existing pricing and merchandising analysts. So I'll probably speak more to the pricing side. And as we see the continued acceleration towards digital retail and online retail and hybrid, we also see the ability to respond much more dynamically to the market with pricing adjustments based on what we see and what the models are learning. So while this used to be a very heavy data analytic and a deep knowledge of the market itself, while there is understanding of market trend analysis, the ability here for existing AI models, existing AI products, to help customers dynamically respond in effectively real-time responses to market changes and make sure that their pricing is best positioning them to deliver throughput and deliver margin is what's changing in this space for pricing analysts. The ROI on increased sales at the right price point, at the right margin point, is significant, in the order of 30%. Again, so this is almost straight bottom line stuff. Making sure that you're not pricing too expensive and not moving units, not pricing too cheap and losing markets. That kind of real ability to in real time flex the pricing is having a straight impact on maximum outcomes achieved for the business. But it does come at a cost. Again, a lot of the heavy number crunching that was traditionally the role of these analysts can now be done by the model, so that those individuals who remain expecting a drop in the size of that workforce and a change in them to understand more about, again, the training and the application of data inside the models and a deeper understanding of the market trends. If we're going to look at them in terms of where would I invest first, the one that stands out for us, I think, is well, it's hard for us to choose between customer service and supply chain. I might jump into a little bit of detail here around the AI potential index, because I think it's not just how much faster stuff get done. And the point that you made right back at the start about the change in the frontline staff from a cashier to, well, let's just take everybody out and self-serve now at the cashier, and now we're dealing with a whole lot of other issues. The current state of that journey in a number of environments is that they've transitioned staff back into those spaces where it is highly self-serve for the customer, but the frontline staff are now delivering roles as brand ambassadors and managing customer experience. So the AI potential index doesn't just look at the difference between where somebody is at the moment on a technology level and what's possible. It also looks at how long has this technology or this approach been in market, and have we worked out where the pain points are and have we solved those? So as an example, we could have looked at this 18 months ago at just take out cashiers, drop in self-service. That level of maturity wasn't there to understand the full life cycle of impact on the customer. So I think we're seeing now that next stage of development, what were the cashiers delivering to that experience that we're not delivering now, and how can I bring that back into store in the hybrid model so that the customer is getting the information they need at that buying decision, whether they're online or in store, and I'm taking advantage of the self-service.
Plus, Mike, to your point, like some roles there's no value in automating, like whether it's at a cost or it's not enough pain. Like a lot of people I'm talking to, it's like, oh, automate all of these roles, and I'm like, but by the time you build the technology to do that, like, are you going to piss off your customers, or is there enough of a net cost difference in terms of when you do realize potential from that? Like, so I think it's really important, the AI potential index itself, because it gives customers a kind of guiding principle, a bit of a surgical roadmap to think about adoption of AI.
Yeah, and these numbers that we're talking to here, are super broad across the whole industry. When we're looking at individual customers and we know what their roles are currently delivering, what their level of current technology is, that allows us to say, okay, well, what's the actual value prop for you? How many people do you have in these roles? How much are they costing you? Like, is it really worth investing in a new way of doing business on this area? And that prioritization, that roadmap, I think, is the real opportunity, not just to chuck money at all the tools and hope that you bring the right one in. But where can we focus our effort first? And from a whole of market, this tells us that we should be looking at the customer service experience and then supply chain. This is what it tells us across market. Those answers might be different for individual organizations as they look at their existing level of maturity and they look at how much they're actually paying the current workforce to deliver and where should they be looking to maximize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So if I was looking, when we look across here, the top 5 areas for automation, there's no surprises. They see the areas that we've really been talking, those elements of the workforce for which a bold decision can really lead to significant material improvements in the throughput, the profitability, the reliability, and the customer experience for a customer. So inventory management, low hanging fruit there, because this is AI and system based and really just manages existing data flows and helps somebody achieve an optimal supply chain through supply chain implementation. And that logistics and supply chain implementation still sits towards the top, but this is a much larger investment. So not just the demand forecasting, not just inventory management tools, but then also starting to look at how do I manage my warehouse potentially better? How do I look at robotics in that space? Customer service touched on. Again, we're looking at much more mature products in the space around the chatbots handling routine inquiries, allowing us to train on how they're aware of the product value, and really increasing the expectations around customer experience. 70 to 80% of these are responded now 50% quicker. So the customer is getting what they want a lot faster. And the workforce are now able to operate at a higher level. So at that escalation, it sounds like it's a painful word, but this is the point at which you can deliver real value to a customer. You can help them in a decision path that wasn't covered in that first 70, 80%, which is already happening significantly quicker. The pricing analytics in the order of 20 to 25% increased sales conversions by making sure pricing points are dynamically adjusted to real-time market conditions. So this is real value, making sure that you're maximizing both the sale and the margin from it. 20 to 25% conversions is significant. The alignment with the best price point makes that happen. And then the customer experience is kind of where we're touching on this hybrid now, where we have a brand ambassador role, a customer experience role in store, where somebody can help somebody in making a decision rather than just the transaction of exchanging the product for money at the cashier.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. It's a
lot of information. Yeah, and I think it's worth noting as well. I'm getting text messages from folks asking me about other roles, but like it's very difficult for us to present all of the data. Like if you imagine at a work ontology level, we've got every single job that exists within retail itself. We can tell you everything. You know, if you're interested in specific roles or you're interested in like a set of roles, like just message us and we can see what we can give you that's based on our models without any like training from your data. And you can see that insights, because it is incredibly important. And I think the point that, you know, that we were making at the beginning, if you imagine that organizations have all of those pressures where, you know, AI is going to make everything a lot cheaper at scale, it's going to become a beneficial thing for the consumer that to bring down the cost of goods, that we can try and drive in more efficiencies within running the businesses and the retailers themselves. So, you know, I think there's a side to this that yes, we want AI and automation, and we want to make sure that we can make products, because you hear a lot of folks really struggling now with the cost of retail, but then we're spending so much money in retail, so there's just so much money in the market. It's because we're not just talking about food goods, we're talking about general retail as well, right? So I think that there is this moment in time where we really have to think about that workforce design. And for me, on the retail side, we're talking a lot of folks are maybe working 2 jobs here in retail. We're talking minimum wage. We're talking about folks that don't have access to other opportunity. And it is extremely important. This one I feel so passionately about, that, we cannot just go down this road of thinking about automating out roles that actual human beings are doing, because that's how they feed their families. So becoming a skill building powerhouse is going to be incredibly important for retail, because we want to make sure that we leave no one behind. And there's a couple of layers in how to think about becoming skill building powerhouses in retail. It's not about just reskilling folks that are being impacted by AI, but it's multi-skilling. How do we think about turning your butcher into someone who can actually do multiple different roles, so that they don't have to work 2 jobs? They can work for one company and they can work multiple different shifts, because there is now more access to opportunity within the organization, and that they're really sort of multi-skilling all of their people to make sure that they're driving this sort of new way of thinking in terms of their organization. You don't just have to be in one certain area. And that will kind of build talent resilience, but also workforce resilience as well. So, Mike, I would love for you to tell us, when you're thinking about those impacted jobs that you were discussing, like, where do you see, so when we're talking about task impacts that impact an individual, either some parts of the job or all of the job, how do we then think about pivoting folks? Where do we pivot them to? Where can they go, and how hard is it for them to do that?
Yep, really good question. And again, what I focus on here, I guess, is those roles which are pretty specific to the retail industry. There's 11 job families that exist across pretty much all enterprise organizations that also have real opportunities, but also have real pressing changes in the requirements of whether it's marketing or sales, whether it's accounts or operations. These jobs are also changing at a rate, and we also want to think about those people. But what I'm touching on here are those roles which are specific to retail. And again, I've just pulled out a couple of those which are most likely to be impacted, and what is an example of a path that we've seen in the models that is adjacent for these people. So we look at the frontline staff. Again, it's over 50% of the workforce at the moment in the retail space, frontline cashiers. And where can we move them to? And I've talked a bit about store ambassadors, brand ambassadors, customer experience, looking at stock clerk or in logistics or warehouse staff. And then what can we do in that kind of logistics space? What does their skills make them suitable for in a new world of work? And then in terms of junior data entry, this is a kind of the space at the data entry level of pricing analyst, for example. So that role that I touched on before. And those roles which are data handling, data entry, what can we do about the people who are currently doing those, such that they are having a career and delivering value and maximizing their value in the marketplace? So looking at how they play alongside AI models, how they play alongside these data analysis tools. And one of the things that I have, you made a really good point before. One of the things I've looked at here is the ROI kind of concept as well. So how in the model can we see that the investment that a company's made in an individual during their employment, how can they maximize that investment so that it's not just a sunk cost and they're churning somebody out to bring somebody else in? So looking at the turnover cost, looking at how much investment's been made and what's the cost to bring them up to what I need, and then how much more valuable is this individual as a result?
Yeah, it's a really sort of interesting one that I've been spending quite some time thinking about more recently as well. It's like that task reduction, but then how do folks know where to go next? Like you can't expect, and I've been having some really good conversations with some leaders in the retail sector, and like, if folks are working 2 jobs, how are we enabling them to get the knowledge they need to navigate them? Because it's our responsibility as leaders to make sure that we are able to know what are the impacts to our work, where are the reskilling paths in order to pivot someone so that they have access to meaningful work. And I think this data is where, I've had so many conversations lately, Mike, where, a lot of, whether it's in manufacturing, retail, a lot of deskless worker environments, they knew about future of work, 5+ years ago. They paid consultants to come in and tell them what are the jobs of the future. And no one could have predicted that what would happen now in technology has happened. And what's actually happened is a whole pile of folks have spent an incredible amount of their personal time reskilling into jobs that now they're being told, by the way, they don't exist anymore. So it is incredibly important right now that we figure out actual impacts to work and where the net new task creation will be, because that will be where we will start to figure out what the new jobs will actually look like, so that we are not sending poor folks who are already working 2 jobs into pathways that will tell them in 2 years' time don't exist anymore. So not to get on my high horse about this one, but I think it's really important that we think about this, because I hear so much stuff in market where everyone's saying these are the jobs of the future. And I'm like, well, how do you know? Because unless you change stuff in your environment today, there will be no change. Like, you're not going to, like, these new job creation comes from you changing your current jobs. That's essentially what will happen in the first phase of this automation journey, right? And I think it's really important that we are getting across this, because we have a moral responsibility to make sure that we leave no one behind. And I think, again, the zero waste mindset, in everything we do, whether it's reskilling, pivoting, or multi-skilling, all of these strategies at a retail level are incredibly important.
One of the things you said there was like really cut to the quick of it. The individual doesn't have clarity about what their future looks like. So there's a whole bunch of uncertainty, but it's not just them. Their boss as well isn't too sure, well, what do I need you for? What's my role?
The smartest people in the world were sending people down pathways that are no longer existing. Like, no one knew. Yeah. And that's not judgment. That is fact. Like, that's like, so if the smartest people with all the money in the world and the resources of the world, the AI companies themselves don't even know yet what's possible. So I think this is why data is so important, because what we need to be able to do is understand the impact of today. What does today look like, and how is that going to change, rather than going, these are the future capabilities of our business based on what? Like, have you talked to your AI team about where they're adopting AI? Have you spoke about the net new task curation that's going to happen? Like, honestly, I was literally at dinner last night and we were talking about this with some partners in the space. And like, it's, for me, I get really like kind of hot-headed on this one, because I'm like, we're just buying into a little bit of bullshit right now. And we need to be really clear that we're using data to make informed decisions on what will happen in our workforce today. And then task generation will happen, and these net new tasks, which creates new jobs. And that's when you start to think about it. So I think, even in this example, look, tell me about sort of what happens. I'm a front line, I'm a cashier. Where do I go next, Mike?
Yep. So this is kind of linking into organizational change, right? So the organizational change has to be happening around them. They're looking at automating the checkout experience, or they're moving to a hybrid model. So we're in that space, and there's a frontline workforce who historically been at the checkout and have been handling that. So they're transaction focused. And if we looked at this 18 months ago and we watched supermarket chains shifting to removing all of the in-store and moving straight to automated checkouts, we think that solves the transactional problem, but we're learning that misses the whole customer interaction. It misses the ability to reinforce that the customer comes back to this store for the transaction going forward, as well as like landing that kind of brand and helping them with decisions. So we've got a workforce who aren't just performing a transaction. So the frontline staff aren't just transaction handlers. They also are engaging and delivering personalities. They're delivering on the experience of being in store. They're also attention to detail. They have a level of knowledge about the product. We can leverage that to make sure that what they are doing now is delivering in this new experience. So the other interesting thing that we saw out of this, and I'm not quite sure how to take it, is that in some areas of retail, the frontline staff are highly mobile already. So they're, like you said, we refer to them as deskless, but they are also very high throughput, very high turnover. They're by their nature. So in that kind of environment, where we do see the individuals who are strongly aligned to the customer interaction and delivering that more than transactional value, the ability to increase retention up to 60% of those people who you do want to keep, because they have the skills to represent the brand. They have the skills to deliver the customer experience, and we can double down on the investment on that. We're removing cost of turnover, the reskill to give them the toolkit to operate in that in a transactionalist store. The toolkit that they need then is the understanding in more depth the product knowledge and how do we transition around product decisions from a customer's perspective. That's investing in the existing experience, customer interactions that they're delivering. So we're taking the skills that we've already got and building on it. And the investment in these individuals in your workforce is significant, because now there's a reason for somebody to come back to this experience, not just to come back and buy the product, but to come back to this experience because they got the product, but they also got something to support their decision making there. The investment side is clear, but the value side is also clear. That the value for the individual is now they're now a much more valuable part of the business. They're a much more valuable individual. Salary goes along with that, but also value for their career going forward. So not just am I looking for another job to deliver on the same thing. I am now a much more valuable part of the commercial enterprise. I've identified a couple of courses here around mobile checkouts and using that infrastructure around internal platforms and understanding product making decisions more. But really it's recognizing, and this was conversations that we've had, the missing piece of that shop front automation was that it's not just a transaction. That was an experience, and people choosing to buy at that experience, and leveraging that has been like the transition to this kind of in-store and ambassador model, which is working today. I don't feel it's the end of the journey, but to your point, we're looking at changes to the workforce today, not what is a future job that we're trying to imagine tomorrow, but what are the changes for today?
And I think the interesting thing that I'm taking, like, this is all great data, but the thing, like, if I was in retail and I was thinking there was going to be an impact to my job, the time frame of how long to pivot, that's a really important data set. So when you think about individual navigation of someone, you need to give them hope that, like, everything's going to be okay. This is how long it's going to take. This is what your expected salary will be. Like, that data stuff is really important for the navigation of the employee and for the individual to feel safe. And I think, you know, the more that we've started to really focus on these types of data sets, I am interested as we start to build out and we reskill and pivot more people, like what does it do to the engagement of the individual, you know, when we start to think about that. But yeah, I mean, that's for another webinar. Talk about the store clerk for me.
Yeah, this one, so the last one, the time frame to implement the infrastructure around that is reasonably long, like greater than 6 months, 12 months. So the time to upskill your staff is well inside that. So we can talk straight to your frontline staff about how they can operate in this new world well within, and give them the skills well within the time frame of deploying that kind of technology. The warehouse one is where it's kind of starting to get a bit close. So we're looking at individuals inside the warehouse, the store clerks, the warehouse operators. They know about how inventory works. They know where stuff is. They understand the process of materials coming in from the wholesalers, stockpiling, getting distributed to further down the supply chain. But what they don't have is that insight into, well, how can a tool make these decisions for me, which have historically been my experience. So they have that experience, which is valuable, as it was in the production line we were talking about manufacturing yesterday. A couple of weeks ago. They have the understanding of the process. They have understanding of the regulations. They know how it works. They know what the toolkit they have to play with is, but the ability then to transition that decision making into a platform and work with that platform for decision making is the big change there. That's a system implementation change. So there's training required, 3 to 6 months of bringing that on board, but there's also training of the individual. So it's a bit more of a heavier touch in terms of bringing the value from the skills that exist in inventory, the skills that exist in attention to detail to this new role. But those current skills are still valuable and do still shortcut a path to this successful role. Again, the cost of reskilling is slightly more significant, but the ROI on retention of this workforce in a workforce where there is shortages in logistics, because logistics is now really being driven by this online economy where fast turnaround, fast throughput, straight from warehouse, from wholesaler to customer is part of the new norm.
Yep.
And again, the value at the bottom of this is that it goes straight through to the bottom line. And similarly, when we're looking at the analyst role, so I've kind of pulled out a junior pricing analyst here. They're already in the data space. They're already in the detail space. But what they are moving to is now a set of platforms that can much more quickly allow them to respond to pricing decisions based on changes in the market. So to make sure they are maximizing the price point, understanding how a customer behaves on the online or the hybrid environment, and getting them the right price point to deliver value. So this is the next step. But there are a lot of paths for analysts in this space. It doesn't need to be in the same space. And we see that you touched on task duplication. So in the analyst space, we see that they're doing a lot of common work across different areas, whether it's financial analytics, business, strategic, marketing, pricing. There's a lot of opportunity for that set of skills to be delivering in different domains. So this is just one example of they can move within the pricing domain to leverage that. But there are other opportunities for them to move out with their data expertise.
So from a bold, we've really focused on where the AI potential is, the task workforce bloat. We have to rethink how we are building our retail environments and our retail companies, while at the same time we've got this deep responsibility to make sure that we leave no one behind. And I think, you know, when you're thinking about going down this road, you need to think about reinvention. You are not going to be able to just do the same thing you've been doing, but a little bit differently. We're going to have to think about how do we rethink the world of work when you've got digital workers in place, when you're having to reskill at a pace we've never had to reskill at, where you're going to lose talent at a pace that we have not lost talent before, which then becomes really important for your mobilization and your reskilling strategies. You know, we need to create cultures of opportunities, and we need to be reskilling powerhouses. And this is going to be incredibly important for us as we start to think about this new world. And by the way, this is not sort of futuristic talk. I'm talking to customers and working with customers right now who are building digital factories. This is real. This is actually, like, they're actually doing this. The technology is evolving faster than we can see. So we need to, from a workforce strategy perspective, really start moving on this so that we understand and we make sure that we're navigating everyone into the right direction. Now, I'm struggling a little bit because I'm getting people message me from LinkedIn, sending me WhatsApps and texting me. And also I've got some questions here in the chat. So I'm going to try and wrangle all of the questions that we're getting through. I know we don't have a lot of time left. But one of the questions that I did like that came through was, how do you see AI transforming the customer experience without compromising that human touch? Like, if you were to build something that would solve for that, what would it be?
Yeah, it's really interesting because that's, I think, the key theme that we saw out of the earnings calls was, in the majority of earnings calls, was that the customer experience is going to be the differentiator. So the friction is getting somebody into the store or onto your site. That's the friction. If you want to bring them back, you're going to bring them back as part of the experience. So price is going to be a different thing when the infrastructure is common. So I think what we've seen, and I think that, like, I've touched on, I think, 3 or 4 times, this the cashier to brand ambassador. This is recognizing. I don't believe the problem's been solved. I don't think that we're at the end of the journey yet, but I think the recognition of, I can deliver an experience that's going to be more valuable to the individual, to the customer, than the friction they had to spend to have that experience. That's where the gold will be. That will be the new differentiator between retail outlets.
Yeah.
I think when we think about how that's possible, that's on the workforce side, but there's also an understanding of the customer side there. It's understanding the nature of the people who are going to want to resonate with your brand. That's the other side of that coin. Understanding the buyer as much as it is,
Yeah.
how can I take advantage of my workforce?
Yeah, and then it's that, like, like the whole conversation about, like, when customer service reps were removed and they put in the deskless, or they put in the self-service, and then everyone started stealing all their products, and then they had to build new AI to stop that. And even in one of the retailers I was in before I left Australia, they had, like, security gates before you could even leave the shop, where it scans your products. So, like, that in itself is this whole new workforce model that no one could have predicted. One more question, because I know we're really, really tight on time. What specific skills would you prioritize to ensure your workforce can adapt to the rapid technology changes that are happening in retail?
I think there's in retail, I'm going to pick two. I'd say one of them is going to be digital literacy. So particularly in a frontline workforce, give them the skills and the capability to execute the tasks that they're going to have to. And those tasks are going to be partnering with digital platforms, whether it's AI or whether it's other products. So I think one part of it is going to be digital literacy, making sure that everybody can play in this new workforce. And the other part of it, I think in retail particularly, and everything from logistics down, will be product knowledge and customer experience. So how can I better represent or better help the customer make the right buying decision for them? So I think that's the experience, and the digital literacy gives people the capability to address that gap around the experience, the empathy with the buyer.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, what's really interesting about that, as for the worker themselves, but for the HR and people teams, it is critical that you are getting across AI. What does it mean? What does it mean for my workforce? The reason that we share data like this is because we're trying to educate and give as much value into the market, because you're going to be the folks that are going to be responsible for actually like sort of ushering in this new era. And we got to make sure that you understand the data. And so I would really highly recommend that, if you find this session valuable, we've got teams of workforce strategists who can run this specifically, masterclasses for your company as an education series. So scan on the little QR code, reach out to me or to one of my team. We're happy to kind of give you that insight so that you can start that conversation internally. I don't want this to be a program of works that sits outside of the people team. For me, this sits with people team. This is our moment in time. We should be owning this, because whether it's a digital worker or a flex worker or a fixed worker, we want to be able to have that underneath our workforce strategy. So it is critically important. So if you want me or one of my team, got some awesome folks that can run a personalized masterclass for you, reach out. I've had another 6 questions just come in. I'm slightly distracted trying to look at my messaging. I will answer those questions live on LinkedIn. I'll post those so that we can answer those on social and get those questions answered. Thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Thank you to Mike and the team at Reejig for taking time out to build out all of this intelligence. If you have found this session valuable, imagine what we could achieve with your workforce and making sure that we can give you that for your whole entire company. Thank you for joining us today. Next week, we are going to I think it's the 30th Halloween special. We will not be in Halloween gear, but we will be looking at the finance industry. So thank you to everyone. Here's to a world with zero waste of potential. See you, folks.